The sirens never stopped. Just hours after a fragile U.S.-Iran ceasefire was announced to the world, Israeli warplanes tore through Lebanese skies in one of the most intense bombardments of the entire conflict. Over 100 targets struck in minutes. And now, Iran has slammed shut the Strait of Hormuz. The ceasefire? It may already be dying. Welcome back. What you're about to hear represents the most dangerous convergence of events in the Middle East in years. And what happens in the next 72 hours could change everything. Let's establish exactly where we are, because the sequence of events here matters enormously. For weeks, open source reporting and intelligence assessments have tracked an escalating military confrontation between the United States and Iran. A conflict that shook global energy markets, sent oil prices surging toward and above $120 a barrel, and brought the region to the edge of something far larger. Then, on April 9th, 2026, a breakthrough, or what looked like one. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif announced that both Washington and Tehran had agreed to a 2-week ceasefire, brokered through Islamabad. The deal was tied to a critical condition. Iran would reopen the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most strategically vital choke points on the planet, in exchange for a pause in hostilities and the beginning of formal diplomatic talks scheduled for April 10th and 11th. Vice President J.D. Vance was confirmed to lead the American delegation. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner were also named. The Iranian side tabled a 10-point proposal covering sanctions relief, the withdrawal of U.S. forces from the region, and, crucially, a demand that the ceasefire apply to all active fronts, including Lebanon. That last clause? That's where everything started to unravel. Within hours of the ceasefire announcement, Israel launched what Lebanese and international reports describe as some of the heaviest airstrikes yet seen in Lebanon. Over 100 targets hit in a matter of minutes. The death toll, according to Lebanese authorities and international monitors, stands at approximately 250 killed, with over 1,100 wounded. Iran's response was immediate and seismic. Tehran declared the Israeli strikes a direct violation of the ceasefire framework, and it closed the Strait of Hormuz again. The clock is now ticking. Now let's talk about what these strikes actually mean from a military and technical standpoint, because the scale here is not normal. Over 100 targets struck in Lebanon in just minutes. According to open source analysis, an operation of this speed and density requires pre-planned strike packages, coordinated waves of aircraft operating with precision-guided munitions, likely a combination of air-launched glide bombs, standoff missiles, and potentially loitering munitions working in synchronized sequences. This is not improvised. This is a military machine operating at a high operational tempo that has been rehearsed, preloaded, and waiting for authorization. The challenge for Lebanese air defense, and for Hezbollah's residual defensive capacity, is the sheer simultaneity of such strikes. When over 100 impact points are triggered in a compressed time frame, no interception system in the region can respond fast enough. You are essentially watching a saturation approach, overwhelming volume, overwhelming speed. From a cost analysis perspective, and this is something analysts track carefully, the cost asymmetry in Lebanon is stark. Israel's advanced air-to-ground munitions run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars per unit. The targets, in many cases, are infrastructure, tunnels, weapons storage, and command nodes. But civilian buildings, roads, and populated areas absorb the blast radius. The price Iran and its proxies pay in blood and infrastructure vastly exceeds the dollar-per-dollar calculation on the attacker's side. And then there is the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly 20% of the world's seaborne oil transits this narrow waterway, 21 miles wide at its tightest point. Iran's capacity to close or threaten this corridor is one of its most powerful asymmetric tools. Mining operations, fast boat swarms, shore-based anti-ship missiles. The threat matrix here is well documented in open-source defense literature. When Iran closes the strait, even briefly, insurance rates spike, tankers reroute, nose are slow, and energy markets go into convulsions. The previous disruptions this year already drove prices toward $120 a barrel. Another prolonged closure could push that number higher still. Behind every strike coordinate is a neighborhood. Behind every casualty number is a family. Reports from Lebanese hospitals describe overwhelmed emergency wards, doctors working without adequate blood supplies, corridors filled with the injured. Among the dead, elderly residents who could not evacuate in time, families sheltering in buildings that absorbed the blast radius of nearby targets, children pulled from rubble. In Gaza, a war that has now run alongside this wider regional conflict for over a year, Al Jazeera reported on April 9th that its journalist Mohammed Wisha was killed in an Israeli drone strike. His vehicle, traveling on Al-Rashid Street along the coast west of Gaza City, reportedly burst into flames after being hit directly. Wisha's death, according to Al Jazeera and other press freedom organizations, brings the number of journalists killed in the Gaza conflict to over 260. 260 journalists. Let that sit for a moment. These are the people whose job is to tell the world what is happening Camera operators, correspondents, fixers, gone. International condemnation has been sharp, but enforcement mechanisms remain weak, and strikes on media personnel continue. The human cost of this conflict across Lebanon, Gaza, and the broader theater is not a footnote to the strategic analysis. It is the strategic reality that no military calculus can fully account for. Now, here is where the analysis gets deeply concerning. The central flashpoint threatening to collapse the ceasefire before it has even properly begun is a geographic dispute. Is Lebanon included in the US-Iran truce or not? Pakistan, which brokered the deal, has stated publicly and unambiguously that the ceasefire applies, and I am paraphrasing from publicly available diplomatic reporting, everywhere, including Lebanon and elsewhere. The United States and Israel have signaled the opposite. Lebanon, from Washington's apparent position, is not explicitly part of the agreement. Iran's parliament speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi have both gone on record criticizing continued operations in Lebanon. According to open-source reporting on Iranian state media and diplomatic channels, Tehran alleges violations of at least 3 clauses of its own 10-point proposal, calling negotiations under these conditions, in their words, unreasonable. And then there is the deleted post. Iran's ambassador to Pakistan posted on the platform X that an Iranian delegation would arrive in Islamabad on the night of April 9th for, again paraphrasing, serious talks based on the 10 points proposed by Iran. The post was deleted. Embassy officials told reporters it was removed over what they called timing issues, without confirming whether the delegation was still coming. In diplomatic signaling, a deleted post of this nature is not a minor bureaucratic error. It is a flare fired into a dark sky. It tells us that inside Tehran, there is likely a serious internal debate happening right now about whether to even show up to these talks, and under what conditions. Meanwhile, President Trump has announced that any country supplying Iran with weapons faces immediate 50% tariffs with no exemptions. The move is widely interpreted as targeting Russia and China, both of whom have maintained arms and trade relationships with Tehran throughout this conflict. This is maximum economic pressure applied at exactly the moment diplomacy is supposed to be getting a chance, a combination that historically does not make negotiations easier. Step back from the immediate battlefield picture and the systemic risks become even more alarming. Energy markets are on a knife's edge. Every hour the Strait of Hormuz remains threatened or closed, oil prices climb. Analysts are already warning of what one open-source financial report describes as a dangerous downward spiral. If tariff escalations on top of energy shocks trigger a synchronized global economic contraction. Europe is simultaneously wrestling with American trade pressure. Tariffs on steel and aluminum, disputes over Greenland, and a NATO alliance under visible strain. President Trump has reportedly raised the possibility of relocating or withdrawing U.S. troops from NATO, member states he considers insufficiently supportive during the Iran conflict. He has also revived rhetoric around Greenland in the context of disputes with European allies. The alliance architecture that has underwritten Western security for 8 decades is experiencing stress fractures at exactly the moment when a regional war risks going wider. And China and Russia are watching all of this very carefully. A fragmented NATO, a strained US-European economic relationship, an Iran that controls the Strait of Hormuz, a Middle East where the ceasefire framework is disputed by its own signatories before the ink is dry. This is the strategic environment inside which the Islamabad talks, if they happen, must somehow produce a durable political settlement. Here is where we stand as of April 9th, 2026. A ceasefire exists on paper. Whether it exists in practice depends on what Israel does in Lebanon in the next 24 hours, whether the Iranian delegation actually boards a plane to Islamabad, and whether the United States is willing to acknowledge Lebanon as part of the truce framework, or whether it continues to back Israeli operations that Tehran calls a direct violation. The Strait of Hormuz is closed, oil markets are rattled, 250 people are dead in Lebanon, a journalist burned alive in his car in Gaza, and a deleted diplomatic post has the world asking, does Iran even want to negotiate? The next 72 hours are not just important. They may be the last window before this ceasefire collapses entirely, and the region slides back into something far darker than what came before. Will Islamabad hold? Or will the bombs answer that question first? Stay with us. We will be tracking every development.